This week we are blessed. In fact, we are doubly blessed this week. We're doubly blessed this week because we get to have a double Torah portion to study and to chant from this week. Aharei is the first one, Kedoshim is the second one. It also happens to be my birth portion, so I have to say that I have a little something for that Torah portion specifically, Kedoshim. You know, both of them in their own way speak about a template on how to create a harmonious community, a harmonious society, really. Sprinkled through different verses, you'll see different parts of the Ten Commandments that are woven in, rephrased, recontextualized, but they're all there, all 10 of them. And you can see the thought process, the thought that went into writing these verses. Those who 3,000 years ago or so really kind of put their heads together and thought, okay, what would we want to have as part of a harmonious, like I said, society? What would that look like? And they set out, and you can see that in many different verses, to set up a judicial system that would benefit each and every member of the community. And they warn, really specifically warn, that there will be no preferences given to the wealthy or to the powerful. They insisted on that point, perhaps because they saw what was going on around them. And they wanted to have a judicial system that was completely democratic. It's very beautiful to see the details of some of the verses that express that. Same thing with setting up the economy. They seek to set an economy that would work for everybody, that would be based on the concept of abundance. In fact, anyone who incurred debt over the several decades knows that every 50 years, all debts are canceled. So there is no fear built into the system. And it's a system that is there to help those who can't help themselves, the poor, the sick, those with existing conditions or not. It's very different from ours. But the orphans, the widow, all that is already built in there, that we would be a society that would care. But most importantly, perhaps, they were insisting on creating a community where members would be emotionally mature, open-hearted, caring for one another. In fact, my birth portion, the second of the two Torah portions, starts with one of the most powerful sentences in all of Torah. And I'm not the only one saying that. Many rabbis over generations have pointed to that sentence and said, this is the one that you want to highlight. This is the one that is the core of this teaching. Kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani, yud he vav he Elohechem. Kedoshim tihiyu, you are holy. Kedoshim tihiyu, you are holy. Each and every one of you, you are holy. Ki kadosh ani, yud he vav he Elohechem, because I, the transcendent divine masculine and the immanent divine feminine, that which manifests as everything, everywhere, and every single one of you, I am holy. And because there is no separation between I and you, because you are I and I am you, I am holy, therefore you are holy. And this is the sentence This is the verse that affirms our individual and communal holiness, and is going to base the foundational narrative of its civilization on that affirmation. We start with you and you and you, and each of us are holy. It is in radical contrast with some of the teachings that have come to us, probably misinterpreted, misunderstood, mistranslated from the story of the Garden of Eden, that saw that leaving the garden as an expulsion for sin, and has labeled all of humanity as inherently sinful and broken, and has based its civilization on that disaster of understanding what the Torah was trying to say, because the Torah never, ever, ever would have defined human beings as inherently broken. From the first moment, we are the expression of God. The divine blows the divine breath into us. We are holy beings, not broken. We are the expression of God, the children of the One. Our civilization, if it had come to pass, would have based its story, its foundational narrative, on the premise that you are holy. Every human being holy. And it doesn't stop here. I'll give you a few examples. I've highlighted some of the gorgeous little tidbits of how this sought to create this emotionally mature, this open-hearted society. Do not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. Why? And the Torah ends this verse by saying, I am the Eternal One. Do not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. Why? I am the Eternal One. I am the deaf. I am the blind. Pay homage to the aged, show deference to the elders of the community. Or another one, just a couple of verses later. Love the stranger in your midst as you would love yourself. Why? ... I am the Eternal One. I am the elders in your community. I am the stranger in your midst. You know, being holy doesn't mean being perfect. Sometimes we associate the two and we're like, well, I'm not perfect, so I'm not holy. No. We are holy in all our imperfections, with all our flaws. Here's one of the most famous sentences in all of Torah. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. As if this needed to be said. You do not hate one another. Do not take revenge or bear grudges. I know. Love your neighbor as yourself. ... I am the Eternal One. I am your neighbor. This is our story. This is the narrative of our nation. This is the foundation of what was supposed to be our civilization that never came to be. I mean, was around for a few hundred years, but eventually was destroyed. And I know what you're thinking, and I know that there are other passages of the Torah that don't feel so beautiful and good, and I want to acknowledge that. These words were written 3,000 years ago. They came from a mentality, an understanding, a consciousness that was very much patriarchal, that was very much clan-based, that had those odd rituals because they practiced a certain form of religion that was, in fact, archaic. There's nothing wrong with that. It was archaic, with a lot of blood and sacrifices of animals, and we see that in this Torah portion just as much as we've seen it through the book of Leviticus. And I don't want to deny that. That is true. But that belongs to a society, to a world 3,000 years ago. And it is true that for us, 3,000 years later, with our personal evolution, our evolution as human beings, our postmodern pluralistic consciousness, those passages are impossible to read. And we have the tendency to just reject all of them. And in rejecting all of them, many of us just reject the whole Torah, the baby and the bathwater. But we have to keep in mind of the context, the historical context of those passages, and recognize that these were the ways people lived and believed and worshipped. Now I'm asking you to set aside these archaic rituals and ways of being, because I think the message at the core of what they were trying to do still is absolutely valid. And in fact, I would venture to say that we would be much better off if today we applied a lot of this. If today, like they did in the past, we sought to create a society that would be so inclusive. So inclusive. A lot of commentators say, when we say love your neighbor as yourself, what they really meant was love your Jewish neighbors as yourself. Right? You should, first of all, live in a Jewish neighborhood, and you can love your neighbors. In that case, that's fine. But it's not true, because I read you the verse that just comes just a few lines before that says, love the stranger as yourself. Same exact wording. That sense of inclusivity was part of the precept that we're going to be the foundation of that world. So we can denigrate the archaic rendering of 3,000 years ago, but look at what we've done. What is our current narrative? What is the narrative, the story of our world? How do we address the stranger? How do we deal with the foreigners? How do we deal with what's different in our world? We reject. We fear. We deny. We denigrate. We disempower. And altogether, we close our doors to the refugees, those who come to ask for help. In Torah, those writers thought to create a society that expressed the abundance of an economic system that would be for everyone. How they cared for the earth because they lived from the earth. And they sought balance between the human life and the natural world. They saw themselves as the stewards of the land, not the plunderer of the land. One of the most gorgeous verses in this Torah portion is, as you reap the produce of your field, you shall leave the corners of your field for the needy and the poor. That's the consciousness of abundance. When you harvest the good of your life, leave for the poor what they want, what they deserve. There is plenty. There is plenty for everybody. And that's the kind of consciousness that changes the energy with which we enter the world. From fear, constriction, and wanting to hold on to what's mine, competition, which is the story of our world. From stepping on each other's shoulders so that I can have the biggest slice of the pie, and too bad for you, you should pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. I'll take what's mine. This is our story. Be aware of that. This is the story in which we have built this empire. this financial empire in which we are complicit because we perpetuate that story of separation, not of inclusivity, of separation, of otherizing. And then in Torah, they sought to create this society that, well, I say that already. But even the passage, with the elders, I was thinking about that. This recognition of the power of the elders in our world, in our life, in our society. The wisdom of the elders. The honoring of the elders. We have lost that. In our world, in the story of our world, of this world we live in, the elders are pushed aside. We don't want to hear from them. First of all, they keep repeating the same stories. Who wants to hear from them? Stories of the war, how many times? And so we cast them aside. We are driven by youthfulness. Turn on the TV, look at the commercials there. It is Forever 21. Forever 21, that is the ideal. Can you imagine a world where only 21-year-olds lived? Seriously, I remember being 21. That was not pretty. And because we don't talk to our elders anymore, we've lost the wisdom. We've lost the stories. We've lost the opportunity to not repeat the mistakes that the previous generations made. And we are bound, because of that, to repeat them. And here we are, exactly repeating them. If only we listened to the elders, they would tell us, no, we've been there, done that. It was a disaster. You're going down the same path. Stop. But no, that is not welcomed. So I know why you're here. You're here, you came to this place because, for the same reason I believe, at least some of it, that I came from to this place. I didn't even know it at the time. But when I first walked into this place and I heard the teachings in the sanctuaries by Rabbi Ted, the founding rabbi here, when I came 20 years ago almost, he spoke the message that I have had the privilege and honor to continue speaking. This message that is rooted in this tradition of ours, in this week's Torah portion, that speaks of a different kind of narrative for our world, for our life. This narrative of inclusiveness, this narrative of love. Love. Can you imagine a society where it says, love your neighbors, love the stranger. You are holy. And in this community of ours, this is the story we've been talking about for 24 years since we've been around. This is the story we've been sharing and anchored, grounded in the Torah itself, of a different vision for our children, a different vision for our world, a different vision for our nation. We are the rebels. We are the rebels because we speak a different language. We wish a different reality. And we've come here not knowing to heal the wound, the deep wound of this story of our world in which we live. Because it is wounding. It is wounding each and every one of us. That story of separation, that story of scarcity, that story of fear. It is a deep wound into our very soul because we know the place from which we want to live, and this society does not mirror that at all. I have teenagers that go to school, and I can tell you, it is not taught in school. It's taught about being the best, testing, crushing the other students in the classroom, being the highest, most competitive, whatever you call it. There is no sense of cooperation and shared learning. There is no sense of shared economy. It is taught to us since we are born. And so we've come to this community to heal that deep scar, that deep wound that is with us, because we know there is another way. And we're not done. In fact, we're barely starting. 24 years into it, we're barely starting, my friends. We're barely starting. I want our community to keep being that community that speaks that different story. Because today, more than ever, this community is most needed. Because the story of the world is on the verge of collapse. It's pushed itself so far that we are nearing extinction on the global scale, us and all that lives on this planet. And not in 100 years from now, in the time of our children's lifetime. And so there are a lot of us in the streets of Seattle and elsewhere that are yearning to find a place where we embody a different possibility, a different narrative. And not that we made it up overnight, that we looked into our most treasured, most ancient texts and found there the roots of a path forward. And I know why we support this community. We support it financially, we support it by volunteering our time, we support it in 1,000 different ways. Inviting people in, putting things on our Facebook page. I see all of what you are doing, and it's gorgeous and beautiful, and I'm so grateful for each of you, because we need to reach out. We need to let people know that there is this place. And we need to keep supporting this place. I've been coming off and on for 20 years. And even when for 3 or 4 years, I was with my family in Israel and then in New Jersey, I remained a member here. We paid our dues monthly, because we believe that this space, this community is worth keeping around. And even if I was on the other side of the planet, on the other side of the nation, I knew that it was opening its doors to people who might find healing here. But our work isn't done, it's just begun. I'm going to invite you in the days and weeks about to look at the ways that you are in fact enacting that story of the world. This narrative of separation, of fear, of anger, of scarcity. How you perhaps metaphorically place a stumbling block before the blind. How you perhaps metaphorically insult the deaf. How you perhaps, not metaphorically, have closed your heart to your neighbor. Because we are victims of that story that we have downloaded without knowing, and we are acting it out. The way we relate to our earth, just as we relate to each other. So look at those places and say, oh, this is the story of separation. This is the story of othering. Let's see if I can do it differently next time. Now, we're going to call for help because we need help in this process. We're going to call for the teachers of the Kabbalah that are bringing the angels into the space on Shabbat. Because we need the power of the angels to guide us through the journey. There are 4 angels in Kabbalah that are always surrounding us, moving with us, pushing us forward as we evolve and grow and transcend. In front of us, the angel is Uriel. Uriel means the light of God. Because the light of God is shining the path ahead, shining its bright light into the darkness of the future we can't really see, and calling us to embody a different story. On our left is Gabriel, Gavriel, the strength of God. Because we're going to need all the strength and the courage we can muster in order to stay the rebellious ones that we are. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work and a lot of mindfulness. And it takes fearlessness. So we're going to need Gabriel. We're going to need Michael too. Michael is on our right side. Mikael in Hebrew. Mikael, the angel that is the mirror of the divine presence that reminds us, Mikael, who you are like God, like Keel, like God. You are like God. You are the embodiment of God. And behind us, Raphael, the healing presence of God. Because as we move forward and progress on the journey, on the path, and if we're doing it right, there should be healing, the healing of our past as we move forward. But not only that, we also become a healing presence in the world. And our wake is a wake that is a healing wake. And all around us, all above us, Shekhinat El, the Shekhinah, the indwelling feminine presence.